From the top, we are the mobile shared services in Berlin, and this is the outline of our presentation. The first one we'll go through is the roles and the team. And then we'll go to the architecture of our code and the current challenges that we have, and then the achievements, our recent achievements. First is our roles and our team. So the main role of our team is to develop SDKs for sharing across the OLX group. The SDKs that we currently have are Ninja, it's for tracking, and then Plush for rich notifications. As you can see on the side, this is a render of one rich push to Android. And the last SDK that we have is the Notification Hub, which is currently being revamped. So there's no screenshot. And then the other roles that we have is to help with integration of the shared services. So if you don't know, the Berlin team has this thing called Comms, which is a shared service that is being used, for example, by Panamera. They are using Lightning for push, Quixote for CLM treatments. And if there is some integration requirements for the apps, that's we handle some of those if they are not our SDKs. For example, also personalization relevance, where we don't have the SDKs, we just help them integrate the services. And then it's also a role to come up with new solutions. We do that by our mobile brainstorming, which we just recently started. This is our team with Ashlyn as the manager, and we are 3 guys. Two guys are moving here. One is starting Feb 1 and the other one end of Feb. Rem started working for us like, I think more than 1 year ago. Yeah. I couldn't remember the exact date, but yes. And here's the structure of the organization in Berlin and where we are. So this box is where the mobile team is, the shared mobile team in Berlin. We have a manager up here and the Android iOS devs. And then the manager reports to the head of engineering alongside with the head of product. And then this is how our services appear on other regions. For example, Panamera, we have some contact person or the Bizzle or Shed. And then our person, for example, Ashlyn or some product manager, will try to convince them, the regions, to integrate the Ninja library or the Plush library or some other library that we have. So that's how our libraries get into the regions or markets. The next section is the architecture of the libraries. We don't really have an app in this. We don't have an app. So we only have libraries. This is the architecture of our libraries. The most important one is that we document how to use them in Confluence and Slate. This is our Slate docs in a link below if you want to check that out later. And we use very few dependencies because we make libraries. We don't want the regions that are using our libraries to burden them with additional app size or some additional performance hit on their apps. So for Android, where we use Java, no Kotlin yet, we use a private JFrog Artifactory for releasing the libraries. And then we use some form of MVP. It's not fully MVP, but they are very testable, unit and UI test. And then we support both Android API 25 and 26. For this is because some regions don't use the higher versions of the API. That's why we need to keep supporting the old ones. And for iOS, we use both Objective-C and Swift, both Swift 3 and 4. We maintain separate versions for them to support all the regions. We use CocoaPods with a private repo and Fastlane to build the test app so that we can run the tests. We're also using some form of MVP in iOS, but it's not really fully MVP. And then it's very testable as well. The demo app we have for showing the SDK's capabilities. And the demo app is also inside Slate. If you want to check that out later, you can contact us. And we will update the document architecture for the future architecture of our libraries. Since if you noticed, it's not fully MVP or doesn't really follow some pattern. So we have to update that document. The next one is still architecture, but now for tests. So since we mentioned that our code is very, very testable, for Android, we use these libraries, Robolectric, Espresso, Power Mockito, and Mockito. And then we have an enterprise account with Bitbar, as Panameras mentioned earlier. And then we use both, for both Android and iOS, the GitLab CI pipelines. These pipelines in GitLab allow us to run the tests for every commit. And then for iOS, we use Cuckoo for mock generation. As I think Panameras mentioned earlier, they have this problem for Swift. Also OCMock for Objective-C. And then we use plain XUnit and UI tests, since we do avoid dependencies in our code. The next one is some screenshots from GitLab. So this is what happens if, for example, you commit to a branch or make a tag. It runs some stages. This one builds the Android library. This one tests it, and this one builds the artifact. And then this is a Slack notification when Bitbar finishes running the tests. And this is screenshots from Bitbar. As you cannot probably see, there are 64 tests for this library. And then this is some general flowchart of how that works. If you commit, then the tests run, UI and unit tests both run, care of GitLab and Bitbar. And then if that succeeds, it builds the artifact for the library. And then if we are satisfied with that, we can manually release it to JFrog or CocoaPods. And then if you make a PR, which is separate from commit, it runs Codacy, but only for those repos that are in GitHub. And then we do a code review, and if everyone is happy, we can merge it. So if you can see, commit and PR are different flows. But for every commit, we make sure that the commit is fully tested. So the next one would be challenges. The current challenges that we have, there are two major themes. One is technical, one is product. The technical one is aligning the architecture of both Android and iOS. Since, for example, for push notifications, there are some platform limitations in iOS and Android. This makes it hard to align them both and to make sure that the tests cover every case, since for specific platform scenarios, you have to write different ones. And then it's also a technical challenge to come up with a new SDKs to generalize solutions that are existing in the regions, so that we can share them with a much more larger base of people in the regions. And then also, the integration of the libraries sometimes are not perfect. Even though it's documented, we noticed that a few times the regions integrated imperfectly. This is also a problem for us, since we don't want to integrate them ourselves, since we only provide the SDK and the documentation. It's also a challenge to communicate and maintain the SDK integration guides. If, for example, you branch into a new version of Swift or Kotlin, for example, in the future, then you have to maintain separate versions for them and communicate this change and update the integration guides. Also, if, for example, we're testing Panamera, we have to run a release build in iOS, for example, we need the certificates, and this one is kind of hard to get. And so that's also one of the problems we have. I think most regions also have that problem, the sharing of the credentials and certificates in iOS. For the product side, problems. One of the big problems is to convince or have the regions prioritize to integrate our libraries or just to update them. Also, this is because we have no dedicated product person for the shared mobile team, but we do communicate with each product person for each project that we work with. Also, we align with the teams that we collaborate with. For example, comms in Berlin, BT in Berlin, Panamera, Shed, all of the teams that we collaborate with. It's a challenge because there are a lot of them, and we need to constantly communicate with them. Also, with the time zone for each region, it's different, as Panamera has also encountered. It's pretty challenging to communicate across all those that are affected by our updates and releases. Recent achievements. So this is a summary slide of the recent achievements. For Ninja, the latest version that we have is in these regions: Panamera, Fixly, Shed, vertical scars, verticals real estate. They are being used for tracking. And then the new plush with rich pushes is being used by Panamera and the Bizzle Android. And then Notification Hub is only being used by the Bizzle right now. So that's the current effort that we have, is to revamp Notification Hub so that it is shareable with all the other regions. Panamera is the first one, I think, that gave interest to this library. And for specific achievements in Ninja, we have recently, I think, gotten some information that we can implement it in Europe and the Bizzle, the new version of Ninja. And then we can turn off and on trackers remotely. This is great because if you want to stop paying for a certain tracker, then you can do it remotely without. And we added lots of new trackers like Apps Flyer, New Relic, and Tune, and some other stuff. The other one is Plush. We have released Plush in Panamera together with the CLM treatments and the rich pushes. So currently, all the regions that are using the current Panamera app have this feature. And then we also have made deep link handling inside of Plush so that you don't need to make your own. And we had some bump in open rates. I did not get the exact figures, but if you see in Google Plus, our boss Herman has posted some information about this bump in open rates for South Africa. This is because of the rich pushes and some other improvements that we made that caused this jump in open rates for push notifications. And also, we have recently completed the CI pipeline for Plush for both unit and UI tests. And for Notification Hub, as I said earlier, we are revamping it, and we're integrating it in Panamera soon. Some future efforts is we are going to investigate using Kotlin for the libraries, and the architecture, we really need to write it down and improve it. And then we are doing the real-time tracker for Ninja right now. And soon we are going to migrate to a new GitLab for all the repos that we have. This will impact a few regions that are using Ninja and Plush. GitLab Enterprise, yes. And then the new SDKs that we are currently formulating, which is not final. An example is an A/B testing library, but it is to be determined. I cannot say. And that's my last slide. Do you have any questions?